My name is Julia, and for 10 years I lived with a secret I never thought I'd have to share with the world. It started on a rainy night when my sister, Anna, showed up at my doorstep with her newborn baby in her arms. She was trembling, her clothes soaked through, her eyes wild with something between fear and desperation. "Please," she whispered, thrusting the baby toward me. "I can't do this. I can't keep him. You have to take him." I froze. "Anna, what are you talking about? He's your son." But she wouldn't meet my eyes. She shoved a small bag into my hands, kissed the baby's forehead, and before I could even ask where she was going, she ran back into the night. I waited for her to return. A day, a week, a month, but she never came back. The baby, my nephew, became my responsibility overnight. I was only 23, barely out of school, working a part-time job that barely paid my rent. I had no idea how to raise a child. But when I looked down at his tiny face, his little fists curling in sleep, I knew I couldn't abandon him the way Anna had. I named him Matthew. I fed him formula when I couldn't nurse him. I sang lullabies off-key when he cried in the dark. I worked double shifts to afford diapers and daycare. Every time I felt like giving up, I remembered the way Anna had shoved him into my arms and disappeared. And I promised myself Matthew would never feel unwanted the way she had made him feel. Years passed. Matthew grew into a bright, curious boy. He called me Mommy before he could even say my name. And though my heart broke, knowing he wasn't really mine, I never corrected him. I was the only mother he had ever known. But every time I tucked him in at night, a shadow lurked in the back of my mind. Anna, where was she? Was she alive? Did she think about the baby she abandoned? The answer came a decade later, in the form of a knock at my door. When I opened it, there she was, Anna, dressed in designer clothes, her hair done perfectly, standing beside a man I assumed was her lawyer. Her eyes flicked past me and landed on Matthew, who peeked out from behind my legs. And for the first time in years, she smiled. "There you are," she said sweetly. "Mommy's back." Matthew froze, confused. I felt my blood run cold. Anna handed me a thick envelope. Inside were legal papers, custody papers. She was suing me for the very boy she had abandoned. In that moment, something inside me hardened. She thought she could vanish for 10 years, live her life without a care, and then swoop back in to steal the child I had raised. The child who thought of me as his mother. She thought wrong. This wasn't just a custody battle. This was war, and I wasn't about to lose. I didn't sleep the night she served me. I sat at the kitchen table, the one scratched all over with homework and art projects, and read the same sentences until the words blurred. Petitioner seeks to restore custody. Abandoned due to hardship. Temporary placement with sibling. Every line tried to rewrite the last 10 years into a misunderstanding, as if I had been babysitting and forgot to give him back. By morning, the kettle screeched itself dry. Matthew padded in, rubbing his eyes, hair sticking up, and climbed into my lap like it was any other Saturday. "What's wrong?" he asked, because 10-year-olds can smell storms. I kissed the top of his head and lied the smallest lie I could live with. "We might have to talk to a judge about what's best for you. I'm going to make sure they know the truth." When he went to brush his teeth, I pulled out my phone and dialed the only person I could think of. Mr. Callahan had handled my mother's will years ago and once told me, offhand, that if I ever needed family law muscle, he knew someone. He picked up on the second ring, and I heard the sleep drop out of his voice as soon as I said Anna's name. "You'll need a custody attorney," he said. "A good one. I'll text you a name. And Julia, start gathering everything. School records, medical, photos, texts from the day she left. Anything that shows you've been the primary parent. Make a list. Then make copies." The attorney he sent me to, Mara, had a tiny office crammed with plants that was somehow all thriving. She listened without interrupting as I told her about rain and a doorway and a baby who didn't ask to be the center of a storm. When I finished, she pushed a legal pad toward me. On the top line, she'd written, "History, stability, attachment. Courts care about the child's best interest," she said. "Not who's angrier, not who has nicer clothes, not even who shares DNA. They look at who has been mum in deeds, not titles." It sounds like that's you. She slid a folder across the desk. "Intake packet. Don't worry about the big picture today. Worry about gathering facts." The next 2 weeks were a scavenger hunt through 10 years of our lives. I signed releases with the pediatrician, who printed out a stack of records thick as a novel. I stood in the school office, while the secretary, who had seen me at every winter concert and parent-teacher night, printed attendance, report cards, awards, the emergency contact form, with my name in every box. I asked the daycare director for a letter, and she wrote 2 pages on letterhead about diapers and milestones, and the way he cried for me the first time I left him for work, and the way he stopped when he learned I always came back. I emailed soccer coaches and the librarian who ran the summer reading program. I printed out photos, first day of kindergarten, the missing tooth, the Halloween where I dressed as a witch because he asked, the messy cake where he insisted on cracking his own eggs. I put them in plastic sleeves because suddenly everything felt delicate. Mara set the first hearing for temporary orders. Anna filed a request for immediate custody and a motion for visitation to rebuild maternal bond. We were routed to mediation first. I walked into the beige conference room with my hands cold and sat across from Anna, who had chosen a pale blouse that made her look softer than I remembered. Her lawyer was all blinding teeth and expensive pen. He started with the word hardship, said it like it absolved everything. She was not well, he said, as if 10 years could be summarized in 4 words. She has rebuilt. She can provide. She wants to be a mother. Anna smiled at me like we were children again. "You always wanted to help," she said, like help had an expiration date. "You've done an amazing job. I'm so grateful. Now it's time for him to be with his real mother." I wanted to throw the chair. I wanted to list every fever I sat through, every night shift, every parent form I signed, simply Julia, because there was no box for what I was. I wanted to scream that real mothers don't leave kisses on a forehead and then vanish into the rain. Instead, I slid a slim binder across the table with a sticky note on the front that said, "Matthew's life." Mara nodded like I'd just followed the steps in a recipe. Anna didn't touch it. The mediator mentioned a parenting plan. Anna's lawyer proposed temporary reunification, weekends at Anna's, overnights starting in 2 weeks, alternating holidays starting immediately. I felt my stomach climb into my throat. "He has never slept anywhere but home," I said. "With me." The mediator nodded, wrote something in his careful looping print. "Given the duration of placement," he said, "we're likely looking at gradual contact at a center first. We need to hear from the child." I looked at Mara, startled. "They're going to make him choose." She shook her head. "No, there will be a guardian ad litem or custody evaluator, someone trained to talk to him. They'll watch interactions, read the file, and make a recommendation. It's not everything, but judges listen." The first hearing was a stomachache with fluorescent lights. Anna looked polished. I had ironed my blouse 3 times. The judge was a woman with a voice like a metronome. She read our filings, asked 3 questions in a row about who had been the day-to-day parent, who had made medical decisions, who the school called when Matthew had a fever. When she got to the part about 10 years, she paused long enough for the room to hear the math. "Supervised visitation at the family center twice a week for now," she said. "Guardian ad litem appointed. No disparagement from either party." The child is not a message board. Back at home, I sat Matthew down at the table with a glass of lemonade and my heart banging against my ribs. I explained the center as carefully as I could. "You'll see your aunt there," I said. "There will be a nice person in the room to make sure you're safe and comfortable. You can leave any time you need to. You can tell them the truth. You can tell me the truth. None of this is your fault." He twisted the condensation ring on the table. "Do I have to call her mom?" he asked. I swallowed. "You have to call people what feels true to you," I said, and that was the only promise I knew I could keep. The first visit at the center was a room with too many toys and a couch that pretended to be cozy. The supervisor introduced herself to Matthew first, which made me like her. When Anna walked in, she brought a mountain of gifts, the kind of brand name avalanche that fills silences. Matthew's eyes widened, then narrowed the way they do when kids sense hidden strings. She crouched down. "Hi, baby," she said, voice full of sugar. He looked over her shoulder at the door, at me, at the exit that wasn't an exit for either of us. "I like Legos," he said, almost politely. They built a spaceship, and she kept calling it our thing. And when he got frustrated and wanted to start over, she said, No, don't ruin it." And I watched the supervisor write something down. At the end, when the timer buzzed, he stood and handed the spaceship back to the supervisor and said, "Can you keep this here?" as if moving the weight out of both our houses. The guardian ad litem came to our home on a Thursday after school. She wore flats and asked Matthew to give her a tour. He showed her the growth chart on the door frame, where we'd penciled his name every birthday. He showed her the plant he'd kept alive for 103 days because of a science experiment. He showed her the blanket he'd had since he was 2, threadbare at the corners. She asked him who packed his lunch and read his stories and tucked him in, and who he called when he couldn't find his shin guards. He shrugged in that way that meant all the answers were the same. She met Anna too. Later, when I asked, she said only, "I'm here to observe." The report, when it came, was sealed, but Mara summarized it over the phone. She notes abandonment for an extended period, primary attachment to you, concerns about Anna's minimization of history. She recommends therapy for Matthew, continued supervised contact for Anna, with a gradual increase only if it's actually going well, and no overnight visits this year. The word best interest appears on almost every page. I leaned against the fridge and cried into my sleeve. Anna did not take the recommendations like medicine. She pivoted to performance. She started posting photos after each visit on an account she'd made public. So blessed to be reconnecting with my boy, with selfies in front of the center sign, which she blurred just enough to be coy. Comments from strangers told her she was brave. She tagged a vague charity. She bought matching sneakers and wore them to the next visit. The supervisor reminded her the center was not a content farm. Her lawyer filed a motion to move faster. Ours filed a motion to hold steady. In between, life insisted on continuing. I made grilled cheese and scraped a burned one into the trash and made another. I sat in on a math group and watched Matthew explain division to a kid who pretended not to get it because he liked listening to Matthew explain things. I put sticky notes on the calendar for every center appointment and every therapy session. The therapist was a woman with the gentlest smile I've ever seen. She talked to Matthew about big feelings with small feet and let him draw maps of the rooms where he felt safest. One day, he came out with a paper house with 3 stick figures, me, him, and a small star in the corner labeled maybe. The second month, Anna brought a man to a visit and introduced him as Uncle Mason, even though no one had approved additional adults. The supervisor asked him to wait in the lobby. Anna rolled her eyes and made a show of complying. "This is so hostile," she said, loud enough for the log to catch it. Matthew built a fort out of couch cushions and invited the supervisor into it. When he came home, he asked if we could make spaghetti for dinner, because it tastes like normal. We did. People love a redemption arc. Anna tried to write one. She emailed me a list of boundaries I should follow to help our transition, all of which were rules for me, what I could say to teachers, what I should tell neighbors, what name she wanted on emergency forms. None of which were rules for her. I forwarded it to Mara. "Do not engage," she wrote back. "We will respond through the app." Meanwhile, my neighbor dropped off a bag of oranges and said, "If you ever need me to sit in the lobby during a visit, I will." I had forgotten how many ways a town can hold you. When the next court date arrived, I wore the same blouse and a steadier heart. Anna's lawyer argued that she'd complied perfectly and was ready for overnights. Mara slid the supervisor's logs forward. There it was in black and white. 3 late arrivals, 2 early departures. The time she pouted when Matthew chose a board game over a selfie. The time she told him, "When you move in with me, we'll do this every night," and he went silent for the rest of the hour. The judge read quietly, then looked up. "Ms. Rivera," she said to me, "how is Matthew doing in school?" I told her about the science plan and the division group, and the way he'd started falling asleep faster since therapy. I didn't mention the nights he woke up and asked if the court could take me away. I didn't know how to say that part without breaking something essential in my throat. The judge denied overnights. She ordered another 3 months of supervised visits, weekly therapy, and a prohibition on social media posting about the case. She also added a new sentence that made Anna's lawyer stiffen. No disparagement of the custodial parent to the child. Anna looked at me then with a kind of clean anger that surprised me in its honesty. She wanted to be the hero of a story she hadn't stayed to write. After court, she caught up to me in the hallway. "You think you've won," she hissed. "You're poisoning him against me." I held her stare. "He remembers what his body remembers," I said. "I don't have to poison anything." She made a small sound, wounded and furious. And I understood, finally, that in her mind I hadn't been a mother for 10 years. I'd been a placeholder. Revenge, if that's even the right word for what rose in me, wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be dragging her online or making a scene at the center. It was going to be steadiness weaponized. Showing up for every appointment, keeping every receipt, stacking every little proof of the ordinary. It was going to be cutting off every avenue where she could claim confusion and leaving her alone. With the shape of her own absence, the guardian, ad litem asked for 1 joint. Session with both of us present. No Matthew, just to hear what each of us understood about him. I dreaded it. We sat in chairs too close together, and she asked us to tell her about Matthew's favorite things. I said soccer, graphic novels, cinnamon toast, the cat that sleeps on his pillow, the way he hates tags in shirts, the loud laugh that means something is actually funny, and the polite laugh that means he's being kind. Anna said, "He likes Spider-Man," and looked at me for confirmation like a pop quiz. I watched the guardian write something on her legal pad, and knew in my bones it was the truth. Captured without adjectives. One of us knew him, and one of us knew an idea. A week later, Anna sent a long message through the court app about how children need their mothers, and 10 years was an unfortunate chapter, and I'm healed now. I stared at the screen until Mara's reply notification appeared. Below it, like a life raft. "Please keep communications to logistics per court order. Julia will be at the center at 4 p.m. on Tuesday." There were nights I hated her. There were nights I hated myself for ever opening the door. There were nights I looked at the tiny newborn photo I kept in the back of my wallet and remembered the rain and thought, if I had said no, none of this would be happening. And then Matthew would yell from the bathroom that he'd made a beard out of toothpaste foam and come out grinning, and the thought would dissolve into something softer and truer. If I had said no, I would have missed my life. The revenge I could live with sharpened itself. I started keeping a simple public record of our ordinary. Not online, on paper, a calendar with notes like M. Finish book 3 in series. M. Beat his mile time. M. Asked if basil counts as a vegetable. It looked like nothing and everything. I made a copy for The Guardian when she asked how he was in between. She smiled at the basil note. "This is what judges mean by best interest," she said quietly. The texture of a child's actual life. The third month at the center, something shifted. Anna arrived on time, sat on the floor, and let Matthew decide what to do first. She didn't bring bags of gifts. She asked him what he wanted the spaceship to look like this time, and didn't correct him when he changed his mind halfway through. At the end, she said, "See you Tuesday," without a speech. The supervisor's pen moved. When he came out, Matthew shrugged his backpack on and said, "It was okay. He didn't have to make it better for me." I nodded. Okay is good. And then she made the mistake I had been waiting for without knowing it. She filed a motion attaching a letter she claimed was from our mother, an old email, conveniently unearthed, stating that she always intended for the baby to return to Anna when she was ready. The date was 2 years after our mother died. I stared at the timestamp and felt something like relief flood my limbs. I sent it to Mara, who sent it to a forensic IT consultant, who sent us back a neat report explaining IP addresses and metadata and why the letter was born last Tuesday at 3:18 p.m. on a laptop registered to Anna's fiancé's company. At the next hearing, Mara slid that report across the table like a quiet grenade. The judge read it, raised one eyebrow and said, "Ms. Hart, is there a reason you submitted a fabricated document to this court?" Anna's lawyer tried to swallow his tongue. Sanctions landed like winter. The judge stopped just short of contempt, reset the clock on any consideration of expanded visitation, and added a sentence that glowed like a lighthouse in the fog. The court remains concerned about petitioner's credibility and insight into the child's needs. On the way home, I bought a grocery store cake and wrote "Basil is a vegetable" on it in shaky green icing because I didn't know how to celebrate without making it a joke. Matthew laughed so hard he almost fell off the chair. "It kind of is, right?" he asked, and I said it counted if he wanted it to. I went to bed that night and slept through until morning for the first time in months. When I woke, the plan in my head was simple enough to fit on a sticky note. Keep going. Keep showing up. Keep the record clean. Let her trip over her own story while I build ours out of breakfasts and bedtimes and plants that keep living. I didn't need to destroy her to win. I just needed everyone else to finally see what I had been living all along.